All right, so we're diving deep today, and I'm excited about this one. We're talking Bitcoin mining hardware.
That's right.
And, we've gotten a lot of questions from you listeners out there about, kind of going beyond just, okay, here's what Bitcoin mining is, to like, okay, if I actually wanted to do this, what would I need?
Right.
What kind of hardware is out there?
Yeah.
And we actually got some great stuff that you sent over. It looks like part of one of those best of lists for, Bitcoin mining hardware. So perfect place to start.
Absolutely.
And, we all kind of have that basic understanding, right? Bitcoin mining, those powerful computers, solving those complex math problems, trying to add those transactions to the blockchain.
Right.
But today we're talking about the actual hardware, what you need to make this happen. And maybe even whether or not as a listener out there, you could get into this.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this topic, I think, is it's so rapidly changing. It's not like, other things in tech where you can kind of, learn it once and then you're good to go.
Right.
This is like every few months there's new stuff coming out.
Totally.
And, the landscape just changes completely.
Yeah. So we're going to unpack that today. What's really important right now, late 2024, if you're serious about Bitcoin mining, like, what do you need?
Yeah.
So I think a good place to start is this term. Everyone always throws around ASIC miner. Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. So, I think the easiest way to think about an ASIC miner is it's a computer chip that's specifically designed to mine Bitcoin.
Right.
It's not like your average CPU that you have in your computer.
Right.
Which can do, a million different things.
Right.
And ASIC is really just focused on, crunching those specific Bitcoin algorithms.
So it's not like I could just take my super powerful gaming PC and be like, oh, I'm just going to point this thing at the blockchain and start mining.
Well, you could.
Okay.
But it would be incredibly inefficient. Because, you're right. Gaming PCs are very powerful these days.
Oh, yeah.
But they're generalists.
Okay.
They're designed to, run games, run all sorts of different programs. And ASIC is really just focused on that one specific task. And so it can do it much, much more efficiently.
Gotcha. So it's like comparing, like a jack of all trades to like a master craftsman.
Exactly.
The master craftsman might not be able to do everything, but in that one specific thing, they're like way better and way faster.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So we know ASIC miners, this is the way to go if we're going to do this. But I imagine there are like different flavors of these things.
Oh, absolutely.
There's got to be different specs.
Yeah.
So what are some things I need to be thinking about if I'm going to be shopping for one of these things?
Yeah. So, the first thing you want to think about is something called hash rate.
Okay.
And, hash rate is essentially a measure of how fast the miner can solve those complex math problems. So, if you have a miner with a hash rate of 100 terahashes per second, that means it can make 100 trillion guesses per second.
Wow. Okay. So like higher is better in this case, right?
Exactly. The higher the hash rate, the better your chances of finding a block and getting that Bitcoin reward.
Okay. So it's kind of like a lottery then. Like the more tickets I can buy per second, the higher my chances of winning.
Exactly. It's a very simplified way to think about it. But yeah, that's the general idea.
Okay.
But there's a catch.
Right. What's the catch?
The catch is that the higher the hash rate, the more power it consumes.
Oh.
So, these things can be real energy hogs.
Oh, man.
And so you have to factor that into your calculations.
Right, because if my electricity bill is more than, the Bitcoin I'm mining,
yeah,
that's a problem.
Right. That's a big problem.
Okay, so it's a balancing act then. It's like speed versus efficiency.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got hash rate. We've got energy consumption. What are some other things I need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so, obviously there's the initial cost of the miner itself. Some of these can be pretty pricey.
Right.
Then there's the cooling system, right? Because these things generate a lot of heat.
Oh, yeah, it does.
So you need to think about, how you're going to keep them from overheating.
So I can't just like stick this thing in my closet and be like, all right, go to town.
Probably not a good idea.
Right.
And then, of course, reliability is important, right? You don't want a miner that's going to be, breaking down all the time.
Right.
Because that's just going to cost you money in the long run.
Okay, so we've got hash rate, energy consumption, cost, cooling, reliability. That's a lot to keep in mind. Like in the real world, how do these things actually come into play?
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that we're seeing recently is a real shift towards energy efficient ASICs. Because, as electricity costs have been rising, miners are realizing that, hey, if I can get a miner that uses less power, that's going to be a major advantage for me.
Right, because it affects my bottom line. Right.
Exactly. So, some of the manufacturers now are really focusing on developing chips that can deliver a high hash rate, but while consuming less power.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's kind of like the car industry moving towards electric vehicles, right? Like fuel efficiency is becoming more and more important.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, so like if you were getting started with this today, like where would you even begin?
I mean, honestly, the landscape changes so rapidly that the first thing I would say is just do your research.
Okay.
Don't just jump on the latest and greatest model, because what's the latest and greatest today might be obsolete in 6 months.
Right.
So, look at reviews, compare specs, and really crunch the numbers, right?
Okay.
Figure out what your electricity costs are in your location and see if it even makes sense for you to mine.
Gotcha. So it's an investment, right?
It is an investment.
Treat it like one. Do your research. Don't just jump in. Okay, that's really good advice. So to kind of recap here, we've talked about specialized hardware, these ASIC miners. They're essential. Hash rate, energy consumption. Those are key things to keep in mind. Cost, cooling, reliability, ease of use. But what about the future?
Yeah.
Like, is this whole thing even sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we all know that Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy.
Right.
And so there are concerns about, the environmental impact of that.
Right.
And so, I think the future of Bitcoin mining is really kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah.
But we're already seeing some interesting developments. There's a push towards using renewable energy sources to power mining operations.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
like solar, wind, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then there's also, growing interest in alternative mining methods, things like proof of stake, which are much less energy intensive.
Oh, interesting. So maybe Bitcoin mining in the future looks very different from Bitcoin mining today.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so for you listening out there, as you're digging into those best of lists, comparing specs and all that,
Yeah.
remember to think about the bigger picture, right?
Right.
Think about energy costs, environmental impact,
Yeah.
and, maybe the technology itself might even be changing. So there's a lot to keep in mind. It's a very dynamic world.
It is. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And staying informed is key.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for breaking it down.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Always good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And for everyone listening, we'll catch you next time.
See you then.